Hello. In this video, I'm going to explain why it's not appropriate to say that the algorithm matters less than individual choice when looking at hard news on Facebook, according to the recent study released by Facebook. So let's imagine a hypothetical scenario where your network on Facebook shares 10 news stories, hard news stories, and let's say that 5 of these are to the left in their political orientation and 5 of them are to the right. Next, the Facebook newsfeed algorithm looks at those 10 stories and it decides to filter one out. So we could say that the algorithm has moved your total proportion of news stories one to the left. Next, you look at the news stories and you decide to click on a whole bunch of them, but you ignore 2. So we could say that your clicking moved the proportion of hard news stories 2 stories to the left. Now the Facebook study says that this situation is good because the algorithm number is smaller than the individual number. And it says that that means that the algorithm matters less than the individual in filtering content from your network. There's a few problems with that. One is that these things happen sequentially, so you didn't have a chance to decide if this news story was good or bad because you never saw it. Another problem is that the algorithm and the individual really are trying to do the same thing. So what if, for example, we hypothetically had the opposite outcome to the one that was found in the Facebook study? Hypothetically, let's say that the network shared 10 stories, but the algorithm in this example decided to filter out 2. Then the individual looking at the stories that result decided to filter out 1 or ignore 1. So in this study the numbers are reversed, and by the logic of the Facebook write-up we would assume that this scenario is bad. But is this scenario bad? This number is larger than this number, but it seems that the algorithm here could be operating very well. It could be more efficiently choosing the things that you don't want to see. We can't know that unless we know what you think of these stories that you never had a chance to consider. So let's consider a third and final hypothetical situation in which the network shares 10 news stories. In this scenario, let's remove the algorithm, and we could do that by switching from top stories in the Facebook newsfeed to most recent. And let's imagine that in this hypothetical study, what we found is that the user behaves the same way as in the first study that Facebook conducted. So in other words, they see this extra news, they have to do a little more work, but then they make the same clicks that they did in the first study, and that would mean that they had ignored 3 stories. Now this is the comparison that's important because these 2 numbers totaled imply that the news feed is shifted 3 stories to the left. If we had this finding compared to this finding, then it would be alright to say that the news feed algorithm is not significantly increasing the filtering or bias above what you were doing without the algorithm. So that would be okay. But we can't say that this is a good or a bad situation by comparing these 2 numbers because they're the wrong comparison, because these 2 work together and this is sequential. So when you compare, so we can't say that the algorithm matters less than the individual with this study design, which is analogous to the Facebook study. And when you compare 2 numbers and you say one is more or less than the other, but you've chosen the wrong comparison, we call that a baseline error.